Aloha, friends, and welcome to today's episode of 8th House Anecdotes. I've got a bit of a long story today, so I'm going to be using some notes. And this story is really to help illustrate how difficult it can be to ascertain what's going on in the 8th house. 8th house, again, has to do with debt, other people's money, fallout, inheritance, and we're going to explore that some more today. And what we're really going to explore is how difficult it is to see. And my suspicion that these screens here, television screens, computer, phone screens, it used to be the TV, it used to be the newspaper. These things are like windows into the 8th house, because you can't see straight into the 8th house from the ascendant. You have to look in from another house. So for example, you can get to the 8th house via the 10th. You go from the 1st, you make a square to the 10th, and then you make a sextile to the 8th. So, you're kind of bouncing off the 10th to get to the 8th. And any other time you try to get to the 8th, you're doing the same thing. You're going through another house. And that other house can really paint a bias, okay? And so what that means is you really need to be careful with whom you are conversing in order to look into that 8th house, because you are going to get a bias each and every single time. And so I have a few stories about looking into that 8th house during a time of fallout and how difficult it can be, and why it's so important to trust the people you're talking to and to be wary of your greed. We're dealing with 8th house stuff here, okay? This has to do with money and greed, and I will be illustrating that in these stories. So let me get my notes back open. Okay, in 2006 and 2007, those are the biggest years, building up to the bubble burst in 2008. In 06 and 07, my 3 uncles banded together to form a company so that they could purchase properties, renovate, and then either rent or sell them and make money that way. They decided they wanted to do this because they had been watching TV in 2006 and 2007 and before. And everything that the news had been reporting to them was that they could get rich. Anybody and everybody could get rich all of a sudden with these amazing home loans at rock bottom rates, with adjustable rates even. Let's not get into those details. The bottom line is, my uncles saw an opportunity and they went for it. They tried to bring my stepdad in on their opportunity. Now, my stepdad already had decades of experience being a financial advisor, watching the market. Decades of experience watching the market because he was a financial advisor. And due to the fact that he had been watching the market for a much longer period of time than my uncles had ever watched it, my stepdad was able to recognize certain trends that my uncles were not. And as a result, he warned them. He told them that they were going in on the market at the wrong time, and that all the indications, all the underlying indications, didn't match up with what we were seeing outside. All the numbers didn't match with, my stepdad didn't understand why we were having a bubble numerically. But he said it's because of these loans, as we know now. So my uncles didn't believe my stepdad. They were greedy. They wanted what they wanted. And they were part of the bubble bursting. So moving on, Fast forward to 2016. The economy is in another recession. Nothing near as like what happened in 2008. And we would have clients coming into the office freaking out. They would watch the news 24/7, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, whatever. Mostly what I was subjected to watching was the 24/7 stock market news channels. So interestingly enough, watching these channels, I could see directly that they were talking. They were specifically talking at the time about how the recession was as bad as 08. They really were. I was there. But it wasn't, because these freaking out clients would come in the office saying, we got to sell everything. We got to sell everything. My stepdad would take him into his office, sit him down and say, hey, do you remember 2008, the time that you're comparing us to? And they'd say, yeah. He'd say, do you remember going out to eat? And they would say, oh, it was so hard to go out to eat in 2008. If you had money in 2008 and you could go eat, half the restaurants were closed. And when you did go to a restaurant, it felt weird because you were the only people there. My stepdad say, yeah, that I remember 2008. Yep, that's what it was like. He said to them, okay, that was 2008. What happens when you try to go out to eat now? Well, the client would say, it's 2016 and there's lines out the door. And my stepdad would say, okay, which one is an indication of a bad economy? And they would look at him and he would calm them down. The news is telling you the economy is bad. Yes, the stock market is down. No, we're not going anywhere. You go outside, businesses are still open. 2008, you go outside, businesses were not open. Really pay attention to what we're seeing. Okay, let me go back to my notes for a moment. We got another example of being really careful about what you see on TV. So this was not long after the 2016 recession. But I think these examples started coming in as a result. So we started having clients come into the office asking us if we could buy them JCPenney stocks. Now, I am not trying to make any recommendations here. I am just relaying a story. I honestly don't even know if JCPenney is still in business because of this story right here. So clients were coming in saying, we're seeing it all over the news. The recession has caused JCPenney stock to go down. JCPenney's been around forever. They're going to be around forever. We should buy. I love JCPenney. I remember going to JCPenney when I was a kid. And my stepdad looks at them and he goes, come and take a seat. Let's have a talk. And so he would say, well, okay, you remember going to JCPenney when you were a kid, but when was the last time you actually went to JCPenney? More than 50% of the clients would say not in the last 5 years. And those few clients that had been to JCPenney in the last 5 years, well, we would ask them further questions. All right, well, how was your experience? Were they crowded? Did you have to wait in line? Did you like the products that they were selling on the shelf? And what did you think of their prices? So the clients would often say something like, no, they're not overly busy and they don't have lines out the door. I like their products, but I'm not a big fan of their prices. So our next question would be like, you gotta tell us more about these prices. Why don't you like their prices? And the client would say something like this. Well, I went down to Penny's the other day or the other month, and I saw this cute dress and it was for sale $100. And I was like, I'm not paying $100 for this dress. But I knew they were going to have a sale that weekend. So I left and came back over the weekend to buy that dress on sale. And what do you know? The dress was on sale for $99. And I was looking at the tag, scratching my head, saying, what is it? It says it's on sale, 33% off, new price, $99. What do you mean 33% off? And you flip the tag over, and all of a sudden it has a new original price of $150. So, we have to ask the client, did you buy the dress? Client says something like, hell no, I didn't buy no dress. It was $100. Come back for the sale. It's only $99. Like, I don't really buy from JCPenney because they do that. And then, so, we're smiling on the inside saying, okay, so that's how you feel about JCPenney and their policies. Most people probably know that. Do you think that people are going to want to continue to shop from a store that does that? Client's response is usually no. And at that point, we can kind of help finish bringing the horse to the water, Zedge, and say, okay, so if you refuse to go shopping at JCPenney because they have bad pricing policies, and everybody else refuses to go shopping at JCPenney because they also know about their bad pricing policies, how are they supposed to stay in business if nobody shops there? And the client will just kind of look at us and then we'll say, it's not a good idea to buy a stock of a company that you and all your friends refuse to shop at because they have bad pricing policies. I know what the TV is saying. I know what the advisors on TV are trying to do. They're not looking out for your best interest. By that point in the conversation, the client understands what we were trying to illustrate, and now they understand what the TV was trying to do. So what's the point? Talk to people who you trust, first off, and also pay attention to what you really see. Why is this important to what's happening today? Well, it has to do with the fact that we don't know how big a forest is until we get out of the forest, because the trunks of the trees are in our way. What are you most worried about when you go outside today? That has to do with 8th house archetypes. What worries you the most with regard to the fallout from death or the fallout from sickness? What are you worried about with regard to debt and other people's money or value or the inheritance? So last year was 2020. The year before that was 2019. I was still working full-time in 2019 for my stepdad. And I only worked for my stepdad until June of 2020. During 2019, for about a 4-month period in the summer, I knew someone personally or knew someone whose spouse, or either I knew someone personally who died, or I personally knew the spouse of someone who died every single week. For a 4-month period in 2019, I knew personally someone or their spouse who died. If there's roughly 4.5 weeks per month, and we're talking about a 4-month period, we are looking at, I'm really bad at doing math in my head, 18 weeks. We're talking about 18 people that I knew that died in 2019. one every week. It was the weirdest experience I'd had while working with the elderly. Now, I don't work in a hospital. I work with financial advising. So it's not like I'm working specifically with elderly folks and I anticipate them kind of passing. I'm not in a hospice. I'm not in a hospital, just a normal financial advisory office, managing people's money. You could be healthy, you could be sick. You could be at the end of your retirement or just starting your retirement. Those were our clientele. And my stepdad didn't think anything of it for the first 2 months, literally, because he was like, they're elderly. Many of them are sick. Yes, many of them were sick. And then a couple of them in their 50s passed away. And that was when my stepdad started to get a little nervous. But what I also noticed was for the first 6 months of 2020, the same number of people passed as in 2019, not including those crazy 4 months. And even after I left the business, I called up the family and said, hey, I'm really curious, because I was actually really good at that. If you passed away and you needed paperwork, your family needed paperwork done, yeah, I'm really good at doing that. There's just something about it, because people want it done right the first time. Oh man, I love getting that stuff done right the first time. Anyway, I called the family up and said, hey, 2019 was crazy with regard to the number of death claims I had to process. How are you doing? Are you backed up with death claims since I'm gone and it's 2020 and it's, the year? No. The same number of people that passed away while I was still working there, roughly the same number of people passed away after I left for the remainder of 2020. So I don't know what's going on. I think we're in the forest and I see a lot of trees. And I look in the windows and I see different views of what's going on in the 8th house with regard to what's happening today. All the fallout of the illness of the 6th house doesn't seem the same as the fallout in 2019. So something else is happening. Something else is coming through that 8th house. And I don't think that it is the same kind of death that we thought it was going to be. So be very careful with regard to accepting what's coming through on those screens and the windows, because they don't always match up with what we really see. And like in 2007, you go outside and what you see is everything doing well. And you watch TV and everything was doing well. But how many people were able to lift up the engine hood of those loans, like my stepdad was back then, to be able to see that there were screws missing, the engine wasn't connected, the transmission was slipping. I mean, we really need to come together in order to work properly to handle 8th house things. I mean, that's just the way it is, because it's the second half of the zodiac. Houses 7 through 12 come together. This is about other people. We need to communicate. That's why the censorship is happening. If you can't communicate freely, you won't get better ideas of what's going on. And I'm not saying better as in like better. I think I just mean more. I think I'm just meaning more. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my rant. It's time for me to go.